They unleashed hell on Earth. Humanity responded with something far worse. No one expected Earth to survive the first blow, but humanity had a strength buried deeper than anyone imagined. Liam sat on the rooftop of his old apartment building, watching the dark sky flicker with silent flashes. The stars were barely visible, now hidden behind the strange clouds left by the Varix pulse. Earth had changed overnight.
Ow.
But for Liam, the change didn't start with the aliens. It started the day Emma left. She had always been the bright one, hopeful, curious, and brave. She was chosen to be part of the Global Sciences team in Switzerland, a project meant to protect humanity's future. Liam had stayed behind in New York, doing repairs on water grids and keeping local power running for the few who still stayed in the city at first. They called and messaged every day. She sent him photos of snow-covered mountains in clean white, labs filled with people trying to make things better. Liam sent her pictures of the city streets, now quiet and empty, but still standing. Then the Varix came. One giant ship had appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. It didn't fire a single shot. Instead, it released a silent pulse. In 1 second, every satellite dropped from the sky. Power grids failed. Communication stopped. The world went dark. That was 2 months ago. Liam hadn't heard from Emma since. Every night, he sat on the rooftop and looked toward the stars, hoping for some kind of sign. He wasn't angry. He was just tired. Tired of silence. Tired of not knowing if she was okay. Tired of feeling like the world had forgotten what hope even looked like. He remembered her last words. Even if the world falls apart, we build something better. Promise me you'll keep believing in us. But now, even that promise felt far away. He looked down at the small solar panel setup he had rebuilt using old parts. The battery held only enough power for one device, and he saved that energy for a small radio. Every morning and every evening, he tried the same thing. He turned it on and listened. Static, hums, cracks, but no voice. No Emma. Sometimes he wanted to stop trying. What was the point? But something inside him, something very human, wouldn't let go. One evening, as he climbed the stairs to the roof with his old bag of tools and wire, he noticed something strange. The radio crackled, just once, then again. Not words, not language, but a pulse. Liam stared at it, confused. He adjusted the dial. The pattern grew stronger. It was steady, like a heartbeat. For beats, pause. For beats again. He grabbed a notebook and wrote it down. It didn't make sense, yet somehow it felt familiar. He ran back downstairs to his small desk, pulling out the notebook Emma had left for him. She always used symbols when she was thinking about science in new ways. He flipped through the pages, heart racing. There it was, on page 12, a pattern. For short pulses, it was part of her theory about harmonic signals, how the Earth might respond to deep frequencies. Liam stared at it. She had written next to it, "If you ever hear this, don't give up. It means we're still here." His hands trembled. She was alive. He didn't know where. He didn't know how. But she was trying to reach him. Liam didn't sleep that night. Instead, he worked on strengthening the radio, improving the antenna, using scraps from abandoned rooftops. The city was broken, but not silent. Somewhere deep below, or far away, humanity was waking up again. He felt something in his chest, something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope, not the loud, fearless kind. The quiet, stubborn kind that refuses to go away. Maybe the world really had changed. Maybe the Virex had taken everything they could. But they hadn't taken this, the need to connect, to care, to reach across the distance. The next morning, Liam climbed the roof again, carrying a metal plate and a small speaker he had cleaned the night before. He placed them both carefully on the floor, sat down, began tapping the same signal back. For beats, pause. For beats, again. He didn't know if she would hear it. He just knew he had to try. Asterisk, they unleashed hell on Earth. Humanity responded with something far worse. And silence fell over Earth. It was not defeat, it was transformation. Emma sat near a wide glass window inside the underground station beneath the Swiss Alps. The sun rarely reached them down here, but they had installed artificial lights and growing walls full of plants to remind them of Earth's beauty. Still, everything felt cold. She hadn't heard from Liam since the pulse. The silence was the worst part. Not the darkness, not the fear. Just not knowing. She thought of his laugh, his steady hands fixing broken wires in the small apartment they once shared in New York. He always said, if something's broken, you don't throw it away. You fix it. She whispered those words to herself often now, but they felt far away. The global sciences team she worked with was busy. Everyone was trying to find a way to bring Earth back online. Their labs were filled with strange devices and experimental energy systems. The brightest minds from every country worked together side by side. They called it Project Echo. But even in all that progress, Emma felt lost. What was the point of fixing the world if you couldn't talk to the people you loved? Every night after her work was done, she returned to her quiet room and opened her notebook, the one she had given Liam before leaving. She flipped to the page with the signal. For short beats, pause, then repeat. A simple pulse. It was her way of saying, I'm still here. She had sent it through the Earth's natural magnetic fields using the lab's equipment. It was risky. They didn't know if anyone would receive it, but she had to try. I miss you, she whispered into the quiet room. She knew Liam wouldn't give up. If there was even a chance he heard the signal, he would answer. That was the kind of person he was. Loyal, steady, hopeful, even when things seemed hopeless. Emma felt a tear slide down her cheek. It had been weeks since the last contact. From the surface, the world outside was still dark and uncertain. The Varric ships were still floating above Earth like silent watchers, and yet, somewhere deep inside her, something stirred. A memory, Liam, standing on the rooftop, waving to her the day she left. He had smiled and said, they may take away our lights, but they can't take what makes us human. As she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She couldn't talk to him, but she could still do something. Emma returned to the lab that night and walked to the console connected to the harmonic transmitter. She adjusted the settings and added a second signal, one shaped like a rising tone, like a song's first note. If Liam responded, he would send the beat. If he heard this second tone, he would know. She had heard him too. A soft hum filled the air as the system pulsed out the signal, a message with no words, but full of meaning. She sat beside the machine and waited, heart racing. Across the ocean and the broken streets of New York, Liam stood on his rooftop, adjusting his radio. The sky above him still flickered, but now he saw something new. A pattern of lights on the horizon. Slow, soft flashes from an old communication tower. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. Then he smiled. He turned on his radio and heard it the same. Its tone Emma had designed. Rising, gentle, familiar. She had heard him for the first time in weeks. Liam laughed, a quiet, warm laugh full of relief. He tapped his reply into the old transmitter again, this time adding a small hum between the pulses, his way of saying, I'm not going anywhere. The two signals passed through the Earth, through the chaos. Through the silence, they weren't full conversations, but they were enough. Enough to bring back hope. Enough to remind them that humanity hadn't given up. People across the world were beginning to listen again. Quiet messages were being passed in forgotten ways through sound, light rhythm, and old machines. No battles, no anger, just connection. Just something far worse than defeat for the invaders. It was the unstoppable truth that humans, even in silence, would find each other again. They unleashed hell on Earth. Humanity responded with something far worse. Deep below the surface, Earth whispered back with a signal only the stars could understand. In a small town near the edge of what was once the Canadian wilderness, a young girl named Nora sat beside an old satellite dish her father had found years ago. She was only 13, but her eyes looked older now. Everything around her had changed when the sky turned dark, and people left in quiet groups to find safer places. Her older brother, Daniel, had gone with a research team to a distant science outpost up north. He was smart and kind, always explaining things with patience. He promised to write, to send word when he could. That was before the sky pulse, before silence took over. Nora missed him every day. She missed how he'd build things out of scraps and explain how the stars worked. She missed how he told her stories about planets and made her laugh. But now there were no letters. No voices, no internet, just static. Her parents tried to stay. Strong, they grew vegetables in a small greenhouse and kept the house warm with solar power. But Nora could feel the sadness in their eyes whenever Daniel's name was mentioned. She didn't blame them. The world felt different now. Even the animals seemed quieter. The birds didn't sing like they used to. The air felt heavier, but Nora had something. She had the old satellite dish. It didn't work like before, but she had found a way to power it using small batteries and pieces of metal. It wasn't perfect, but sometimes it gave her little sounds. Faint ones. Like whispers. Every day after chores, she sat beside it, wrapped in a blanket, listened. Static, humming, silence, and one's beat. For short pulses, then nothing. She didn't know what it meant, but it made her heart jump. It was different. It was real. That night, she flipped through her brother's old notebook, the one he had given her before he left. In it were his drawings, his science notes, and one strange page. It had a pattern drawn with little lines. 4 dots. A pause. Then for more next to it, Daniel had written, "Earth speaks in rhythm. Listen, you'll know it when you hear it." Her hands shook as she matched the beat from the dish to the page. Could it be him? Could someone out there still be trying? She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she began working on a small transmitter from the parts her brother had left behind. She didn't fully understand it, but she remembered his instructions. All signals need to things power and hope. She had both. The next morning, she sent out her first reply, and steady. For beats, a pause. For again, then she waited. No answer. The next day, she did it again. Still nothing. But she didn't stop. Something inside her refused to give up. Then, 3 days later, the satellite dish made a new sound. A rising tone. Gentle, like a musical note. She covered her mouth with her hands and tears filled her eyes. She didn't know who it was, but they had heard her. Someone was out there, maybe. Daniel, maybe someone like him, someone who still believed. That night, Nora built a stronger antenna using copper wire and parts from an old radio. She planted it on the rooftop and sent the signal again. She added a short melody. The same lullaby her brother used to sing to her when she was little, just in case he was listening, across the world. People like Nora, Liam, and Emma were starting to connect through sounds, through light, through rhythm. No one fired a shot. No one needed to shout. The response wasn't war. It was connection. The Vorex, watching from above, had expected panic, weakness, and surrender. Instead, they saw something they didn't understand. A planet of humans, refusing to be alone, not through power, but through purpose. Not with weapons, but with hope. In a quiet house, on a quiet night, a little girl stared up at the sky and smiled. Not because everything was fixed, but because someone had answered. And for humanity, that was enough to begin again. Asterisk, they unleashed hell on Earth. Humanity responded with something far worse. Not a weapon, not an army. But the planet itself began to wake. In a quiet desert town, once known for its open skies and warm winds, a young engineer named Matteo sat alone beside his workshop. The tools around him were silent, the solar panels on the roof dusty but still. Catching just enough sunlight to power his small systems, Matteo missed his sister Sophia. She had been everything to him. His only family after their parents passed away. She loved growing flowers in the sand and always said, "The earth may look dry, but it still remembers how to bloom." When the Vorex pulse hit the earth, Sophia was in Brazil working with a group trying to save rare plants and trees. They had big hopes of using nature to help the planet heal, Then everything went silent. Mateo tried everything: radios, signals, even building his own communication tower, but nothing worked. No messages came through, no updates, no word only. The wind. At first he kept busy fixing small machines for the town: water filters, solar heaters, wind turbines. But slowly, people left. Some went underground. Others followed old maps to bigger cities. Mateo stayed because he believed Sophia would find him. But as days turned to weeks and weeks to months, hope became harder to hold. One day, while cleaning the old greenhouse she had built years ago, he found something. It was hidden in a glass jar, buried under soil. A note in her soft handwriting. It said, "If we ever get cut off, follow the rhythm of the earth. She remembers us. I will remember you." He read the note 3 times. Then once more, something inside him shifted. He walked back to the workshop and opened her old computer drive. It still worked, just barely. Inside were files named after trees and weather systems, but one stood out. Gaia, signal prototype. Mateo clicked on it. It was a project she had been working on, a way to use plants, soil, and vibration to carry messages through the natural energy. Fields of Earth. Most people would have laughed at the idea, but Mateo didn't. Not because he fully understood it, but because she believed in it. And if she believed, he would try. He spent the next week building a large soil bed antenna, combining organic material with copper wiring. It looked strange, like a garden, and a radio had become one. He placed it on the open ground outside the greenhouse and powered it with his remaining batteries. Then he tapped in a slow rhythm. For beats, pause. For again, nothing happened. But he kept going. Every morning, every evening. Then one evening, the garden bed shimmered faintly. The soil pulsed just once. Mateo froze. Then it pulsed again. A soft glow, like light traveling through the roots. It was real. Someone was listening. Maybe not Sophia, but someone. A few days later, he received a patterned back, a slow vibration. In the ground, like a drum, far beneath the earth. The signal was weak, but it matched the one others had begun to hear across the world. He added a message, a single word shaped in signal code. Sophia, and waited. Hours passed. Then a pulse came through. It didn't spell words, but it matched her signal pattern, one she always used in her test runs. Kind of signature knot. Mateo sank to his knees in the sand, overwhelmed. She was alive. She had found a way. Somewhere far away, his sister was using the earth itself to speak. Not through screens, not through satellites, but through rhythm. Through nature, through memory. Mateo stood up and wiped his eyes. He connected the antenna to a wind-powered light system and shaped it into a glowing flower. Every time the signal pulsed, it lit up. He wanted her to know. He remembered, and he was. Still here, across Earth, small pulses began to join together through roots, rocks, and sky. They weren't loud, they weren't perfect, but they were growing. People were reconnecting, not because they had better tools, but because they refused to give up. The planet had gone silent, but humanity never stopped whispering, and in that whisper, there was something far worse than fear for the invaders. It was hope, living, breathing, growing. They unleashed hell on Earth. Humanity responded with something far worse. Fear began to spread, not on Earth, but among the invaders themselves. On the edge of a broken city in northern Australia, a young teacher named Arya walked through. The empty school halls, her footsteps echoing quietly. Dust floated through the air where sunlight poured in from shattered windows. Books lay open on desks where children once sat. It had been months since the sky turned dark, since the pulse from space silenced everything, but that wasn't what hurt the most. It was the silence from her younger brother. Finn, he had been one of the early volunteers sent to a deep-sea science station to help study Earth's magnetic core. It was supposed to be safe, far beneath the ocean. They had promised regular contact. Then the pulse came, and she heard nothing since. Arya kept teaching for a while. Even after the power went out, some families stayed in the area, and their children needed something, anything normal. She read. Stories by candlelight, drew maps on chalkboards, and helped the children learn with wooden puzzles and sunlight-powered tablets. But slowly, the families left, following rumors of safer places or underground shelters. One by one, they disappeared. The school became quiet, and so did Arya still. Every morning, she walked to her classroom. She didn't know what else to do. She kept Finn's old notebook in her pocket. She loved drawing ocean currents and planets, imagining how the Earth talked to itself through energy and water. They used to sit outside at night, watching the stars and laughing about strange ideas. He once said, "If Earth ever goes quiet, it'll find a way to speak again. Maybe not through words, but through people. Like us." She didn't believe it at the time, but now she needed to. One day while cleaning the supply room, she found an old metal box filled with emergency communication tools, mostly broken. But one small item caught her eye, a water sensor transmitter. Used to send signals through deep pressure waves. She held it in her hands and thought of Finn. Could he still be down there? Could he be trying to reach her in ways no one expected? She didn't know, but she had to try. Over the next few days, Arya turned her classroom into a small lab. She cleaned the transmitter, repaired the wiring with copper strips, and attached it to a solar battery. Then she carried it to the coast and dropped the line into the sea. She tapped a message soft, slow into the device. For pulses. Pause. For again, it was the same pattern she had started hearing in stories past, by travelers through the forests, deserts, and cities. A rhythm of connection. She didn't expect anything, but 3 days later, the device buzzed faintly. She ran to it and listened. A soft pulse answered lower in tone, heavier like it came from far below. Her heart stopped. The next signal included a rise upward tones, followed by a long pause. It was his signature. Finn had used it for years in their made-up code. It was him, somehow, across the deep ocean, through the Earth's silence. Her brother had heard her. He was alive. He was trying to. Tears filled her eyes as she smiled. She didn't know what he was saying, not exactly, but she understood the meaning. "I remember. I'm still here. I won't stop." She tapped a message back into the water. Not with words, with feeling, with rhythm. She played their old lullaby, and pulse formed something only he would recognize. The sea was quiet for a long time. Then came an echo. The same melody, shaped in deep tones. The siblings were far apart, but not alone anymore, far above Earth. In the quiet control room of a Virax warship, something strange was happening. The commanders watched as signals passed through the planet, not from machines, but from the Earth itself. Vibrations, rhythms, lights. They didn't know what they meant. They didn't understand how humans were doing it. They expected weapons. But instead, Earth responded with connection, with feeling, with unity. One Virax scientist, younger and curious, watched the signals closely. "They're not fighting," she whispered. "They're remembering each other." Another scoffed. "Weakness." But the young one shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "It's something we don't have." For the first time, a crack formed in the Virax wall of certainty. Because what they saw wasn't fear. It was something worse. It was hope. They unleashed hell on Earth. Humanity responded with something far worse. The human spirit was no longer just emotional, it had become evolutionary. In the mountains of Peru, where the clouds hung low and the air was quiet, an elderly man named Elias sat in his wooden chair, staring out over the valley. His home was simple, just a small house made of stone, a wind turbine on the roof, and a tiny garden behind it. He used to live here with his granddaughter Camila. She had always been full of life, always asking questions, always wanting to learn. She helped him build things, fix old machines, talk to neighbors about new energy ideas. But she was gone now, not lost, just far away. Camila had joined a world education program just before the Virax arrived. She traveled to Asia to help teach children in distant villages how to use solar tools and grow food in new ways. She had promised to return. Then the sky changed. The power went out, and all the voices went silent. Elias had tried everything to reach her. He climbed hills to get better signal. He repaired an old radio. Even wrote messages on paper and handed them to passing travelers who were moving from town to town. But no one brought news. No one had heard of Camilla. So now, Elias simply waited. Every evening he sat outside and looked at the sky. Not to find spaceships or answers, but to remember. He held an old scarf she had knitted for him. It was soft and full of bright colors. She said it was her way of painting the sky in cloth. He missed her so much that his heart hurt. But something inside him refused to stop hoping. He still cared for the garden they built together. He still polished the solar panels. He still repaired the tiny water pump she had made from scraps. Because doing those things kept her close. One day, while checking the water system, Elias noticed something odd. A strange vibration hummed through. The pipe, not water pressure, but something else. He knelt down and listened closely. It was steady, gentle, for pulses. Pause. For again his eyes widened. He had heard stories from passing villagers about the Earth's rhythm. They said people from far places were sending signals through nature, through the ground, the water, the wind. He never believed it, until now. Elias ran inside and pulled out a small copper box Camilla had helped him build years ago. It was a water tone receiver, something they once used for fun to measure rainfall changes. He rewired it, connected it to the pump, and placed it by the garden wall. Then he waited. An hour passed. Then 2, then it buzzed again. But this time, there was a second pattern. Softer, slower. It was a melody, a short, tone. He gasped. Camille used to hum that melody while watering the plants. He closed his eyes. It was her. She was alive, and she had found a way to speak. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He touched the receiver gently, as if it were her hand. He didn't know where she was, but she had remembered. He quickly took an old metal pan, tied it to the water pipe, and began tapping. He tapped her name, slowly, carefully. Then he added a short rhythm or song they once sang together when she was little. Then he waited again. The pan buzzed gently after a few minutes. The same rhythm came back, faint but perfect. She had heard him. Elias spent the next few days building a better system. He used mirrors to catch sunlight and power a small generator, shaped the garden beds into rings that vibrated with each message. When the wind blew, the signal grew stronger. Other villagers began visiting. They were curious. Some brought their own stories, others had family far away too. Elias helped them build receivers. Soon, a small network of lights, tones, and water songs spread through the hills. Not because anyone ordered it, but because humans needed it. They needed to feel close again. They needed to be heard, far above Earth. The Variks watched. They didn't understand. There were no weapons, no orders, no leaders shouting commands, just people old and young using what little they had to find each other, to remember, to hope. The Varik scout reported back. No enemy formations, no threats, but their captain frowned. These signals, they're everywhere now. Another voice whispered. They are not signals. They're something worse. They're human. They unleashed hell on Earth. Humanity responded with something far worse. A final broadcast was sent not in anger, but in clarity, in a quiet corner of Kenya, where tall grass danced with the wind and the sun painted gold on the land. A boy named Tendo sat beside a cracked screen and an old solar-powered tablet. He was just 16, but he felt older now. His father, Kojo, had been an engineer, a calm man who believed in people more than machines. He used to tell Tendo, if we lose the sky, we still have the ground beneath our feet. Kojo had gone to the Central Research Dome in Nairobi 2 years ago. It was a program meant to link distant regions with new clean energy systems. He promised Tendo that once everything worked, he'd come back with stories and tools to rebuild their village. Then came the Sky Pulse, and everything changed. At first, Tendo waited for a message. Then days became weeks. People left the village. Some gave up. Some went north. Following rumors of safety, Tendo stayed. He couldn't leave, because every time he closed his eyes, he could still hear his father's voice, calm, steady, and full of purpose. Even in the dark sun, we are the light. Tendo didn't know how to send a signal. He wasn't a trained engineer like his father, but he had watched him closely over the years. He had helped connect wires, cleaned old circuit boards, and sat beside him when he mapped signal paths across. The hills he remembered the last thing they built together, a sun-powered projector. It's made from mirror pieces and old satellite lenses. It was meant for teaching, for telling stories under the stars. But now, it sat unused under a sheet. One evening, Tendo uncovered it. He stared at the mirror and whispered, "What if the sky can't hear us? What if we send a story instead?" He spent the next week adjusting the projector. He cleaned the lenses, fixed the wiring, and pointed it toward the hills. He took the tablet and added drawing simple images that showed life before the pulse and what it had become. He drew his father planting a tree, then him waving goodbye, then himself, sitting alone waiting. At the bottom of each image, he added one word in big letters: remember. When the projector was ready, he waited for night. Then he turned it on. The light rose into the sky, slow and silent. The pictures flashed on clouds, on trees, on old rooftops. Anyone watching would see his story. He ran it again the next night, and again the next. Until one night, it happened. Someone answered. A beam of light flashed from the distant hills, not just once, but in a pattern. It blinked softly, then again. Then it drew a small, flickering shape a tree. Tendo froze. Only one person would send that. His father Kojo had seen it. He was alive. He was watching. And now he was speaking too, not with words, but with light. Tendo quickly adjusted his beam. He drew a star, then a heart. The reply came back, a line, then a circle, his father's way of saying, "I'm proud." Tears rolled down Tendo's face. They still couldn't speak, but they were connected. Not through screens or machines, through memory, through light, through love, across Earth. Others watched in villages and cities, mountains and forests. People began sharing their own lights messages, shaped in movement, tone, and color. The planet lit up in pieces, no leaders, no orders. Just people remembering each other and finding ways back in orbit. The Varix command center received the final signal. Not a threat, not a demand, a broadcast. It showed Earth flashing in soft colors, glowing with a new pattern. Not digital, not artificial, but alive. It wasn't war. It was something far worse for them. It was unity. The Varix stared at the image of a boy in Africa, lighting up the sky with simple drawings. A boy who never gave up. A planet that refused to go dark. The highest-ranking Varix officer closed his eyes and, for the first time, felt something strange. Respect. He turned to his team and said quietly, "We don't understand these people. They have no great weapons, no shields. But they won't fall. They become stronger when they're apart. They remember. And they reach each other without anything we use." Another officer asked, "Should we attack?" Again, the commander shook his head. "No," he said. "We leave. They've already won something we cannot take." Asterisk, they unleashed hell on Earth. Humanity responded with something far worse. And in doing so, Earth opened a future no one had dared imagine. Maya stood on the edge of the rebuilt city park, watching the sunrise touch the tops of the new trees. It was her first morning back in her hometown after months away in a far country. Helping with Earth's recovery efforts, she missed her brother Aiden. He had stayed behind in their neighborhood, working to fix the old water systems and protect their community. They had promised to stay close, to share every step of the hard days ahead. But when Maya left, things changed. The sky darkened, the pulse hit, communication broke, letters stopped, messages disappeared. The world felt bigger and emptier. She felt distant. She wondered if Aiden still thought of her, if he remembered her promise, if she could ever find her way back to him now. As she watched the city awaken with new life, Maya felt the weight of distance heavier than ever. She pulled a small device from her Paquita glowing orb that held a message. She had recorded her voice before leaving. Simple words. A promise. A hope. She touched the orb, and a soft light pulsed. Then, the help of a local network of survivors. She sent the orb's signal out across the city, through air, through wires, and through the new living networks growing beneath the earth. The message was clear. I am here. I remember you. We will find each other. Days passed. Maya heard nothing, but she did not stop. One afternoon, while walking through a garden grown on an old rooftop, she noticed a faint light near a small tree. It blinked, slowly. For pulses, pause. For more, she smiled. It was Aiden. Somehow, he had heard her. He had found a way, not with phones or satellites, but with something deeper, something. Maya sent her reply, adding a melody they both knew from childhood, a song that carried their memories, their love, their hope. The light blinked back. Stronger now, their messages became a rhythm, a quiet conversation through light and energy. She felt close again, closer than she had in months, closer than she ever thought possible, because humanity was more than machines. Distance. It was connection. It was caring. It was refusing to be broken. Maya looked up at the sky. The Varric ships were gone. The silence that had haunted. Earth was lifting, and in its place was something far worse for those who tried to break them, a world united by hope. Years later, children would gather around the glowing trees, listening to stories of how Earth had faced the darkness and found the light, how people like Maya, Aiden, Liam, Emma, Nora, Mateo, Arya, Elias had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to be human, not by fighting with weapons, but by holding on to each other, by never giving up, by responding with something far worse than defeat, hope.